All right. Sorry about the delay. I'm trying to work out some of the kinks that I'm having here. So I tried to set up a different profile and having trouble logging in to my ex account. But that said, hello everybody. Welcome to the Political Matrix. Um, Shout out to La Senora Chamonique. Thomas Oklahoma's in the building. What's up, Warren? I see Rick Solis also. Thomas says that was a heated panel. Marcus made some great points. Yeah, I wanted to because Chris is out of town right now. And I guess there was a little mixed up in signals, so we weren't on the same page, but he will be back tomorrow. And so we will do a regular show for tomorrow. But I wanted to address some of the stuff in that panel, and for for those who did not see the panel, um, I do recommend that you guys check it out. Um, I guess I can go to my phone for some of the stuff for as far as for X. Um, let's see. So, oh, let me pull it up. So for that panel, I guess we'll just hop right into it. And Warren, I'm waiting to hear back from Chris what he thinks about the intro. I definitely like it. So just waiting to confer with him. Um, the panel that Sabby had, and I guess let me put up X also, so I can kind of give you guys just a little bit of background. Um, and first, I do want to start off before anything with saying shout out to Sabby for having the panels in the first place. I think that they do give a good window into um, they give a good window into the Black community and what we think on some of these topics. And it's uh, it's the only larger platform that I can think of that even does formats like this. And I do got to give her a lot of credit for the way she handled it. Um, I feel like she was very fair. Very easily, she could have been more biased or partial towards Nick, since he is they are part of RBN together, and Afeni is formerly part of RBN. So she could have very easily kind of slanted things their way. Um, Being that I've been on the panel a couple of times, she could have easily slanted things my way. And when it seemed like things started getting out of control, Savvy was good about just saying, you know what, I'm muting everybody. Let's try to get this back on topic. And it is tough also when you have that many people who are engaged at the same time. I will give a lot of credit to the other panelists also. Um, Most of us, I'm sure, are used to at least being on our own platforms, um, and being able to kind of talk as much as we like to talk, and to be able to explain things out the way we're used to. And I think that for as many people, I think we did do a good job overall. Each person trying to limit themselves to a degree. I disagree. I think one person didn't do that very well. But we'll get into that. So if you didn't see the panel, or if you just watched the panel alone and you had no idea what the panel was going to be going into, what it was going to be talking about, these were the topics that we were supposed to be discussing. So, one, who do you support for 2024 and why? Um, no one counts as well. So, that was leaving a lane open to those people who were, couch 2024, or saying that they weren't going to support any candidate, which Savvy was able to get that question answered. But as you could tell, it seemed like a lot of people added in a bunch of different things that they start going into a lot of other stuff instead of just kind of like answering the question. Um, Two, how are both parties performing on issues that affect the Black community? Three, why has Trump increased support with Black voters? 4, opinion on reparations. 5, foreign policy and immigration. And so, if you saw the tenor of it, the whole thing was looked at as almost just like a debate on immigration and reparations, because that's what it basically turned into. Um, Granted, you can make an argument that, depending on your perspective, that these topics all kind of go hand in hand and are intertwined. But I feel like there's a way to talk about each particular thing without just going into these uh, over overarching and wrapping everything in. So, for those who didn't see it, a recap: we had, of course, myself was there. So Sabby, of course, is there. I was there. Nick from RBN, Afeni, formerly of RBN. Um, you had uh, Be Easy, Cloudus, um, Denise, Pamela Denise Long, and Marcel Dixon. And if you couldn't tell the leanings, you had Be Easy, Pamela Denise Long, and Marcel, which were kind of more. I would just say flat out that they were activists. And I think where some of the issues come in is Marcel sometimes spoke to us as if everybody there is an activist for reparations. Now, let me clarify that a little bit. Supporting reparations and being an activist for reparations is not the same thing. And that's where I felt where they're looking at things through a different lens. I'm looking at the whole situation as far as an analyst. I'm analyzing how I see the current situation, not what the situation can be or what you think the situation should be. I'm analyzing what do I see the material facts of the matter at the current time. No more, no less. Now, as an activist, you're supposed to throw all that out of the window, because if you start off from the premise that you can't do something or that there's an excuse to not get something done, then you're already starting off in a negative at a negative point. The activists, I feel like they need to understand that everybody there is not an activist, or not an activist for whichever cause you're talking about. Some of us are just giving our opinions. Um, would I support reparations and different things? I'll get into. I think it's pretty well understood. Well, I don't know if the reparations activists understood that everybody there supports reparations. Um, because Marcel in particular argued as if we are trying to stop him from reparations, like we are some kind of obstacle in his way. And it for me, I was trying to kind of bide my peace as much as possible, because I even started out saying that I'm going to try to I'm going to start off being a little bit of a contrarian, just so that we can talk about this and try to be more nuanced. And I realize some of the activists don't want to be nuanced. They don't want to talk about this. And the reason why I'm trying to be nuanced is because if you're being nuanced, that's how you brainstorm and try to find solutions. I feel like there were plenty of things which I wanted to ask and address that were not getting answered because emotions and feelings were clouding over the issues. Um, Rick says here, let's see. Rick says, Marcel was out of line. I got to say, there's something deeper there. Oh, I completely agree that there's something deeper there. I don't, and another thing I think that some of the people need to understand is that we all have different life experience. We all have different lived experience. We all live in different places, different experiences. And the experiences which Marcel or Pamela Denise, or I mean, I can even say me and Nick, we both grew up in the same city roughly. He grew up on the Missouri side, I grew up on the Kansas side. And I guarantee you our lived experiences aren't the same. And so I think a lot of that is not taken into play. But I do feel like Marcel has some, I don't know if where he grew up, there's a lot of tension and back and forth and fighting. I know Claudius, he said that in Texas, he's run into that black and brown divide. I've heard a lot about that in California. And I think because I did say that coming out of California, I think that some of them think that like I grew up in California and that I have the same experiences, which where I grew up, I didn't have the same type of relationship as far as the black and brown community. I didn't go through the same kind of beefs and stripes that a lot of people in Texas or in California go through. I didn't go up through this black and brown division. I grew up with a lot of black and brown unity. So for me, it's different for me to run into people who that's their lived experiences. Now, I don't try to overshine my lived experiences over theirs and make mine take priority. I try to understand, and I feel like there wasn't a lot of trying to understand each other's perspectives and hearing things out to have a serious conversation on the matter. Um, because I felt um, Marcel in particular just was kind of I don't know. It seemed like everything that was said to him, he took it as an attack, and that's how it came across to me. Um, what's up, Wheezy? Thomas says I can respect Marcel's passion for reparations. He just can't agree with other reparationists, orgs, those who support reparations or other activists. It's his way or the highway. LOL. I felt I agreed the same thing. That's what it seemed like to me. After the after the panel was over with, I reached out to Be Easy because I do want to talk to Be Easy, and I feel like if Be Easy can understand some of my perspectives and where I come from on things, and I can understand his better, then you can actually have a conversation that can get somewhere and you can actually build. I would say the same thing with Pamela Denise. I think that there's definitely room that can be room and ground to be able to build and see each other's perspectives a little bit differently. If we knew each other a little bit better, I felt Marcel though he was so assured in his own views, and I heard people in the chat even saying y'all need to understand Black history more. Um, that is a chat full of very educated and knowledgeable people, and it's almost like a little bit of a disrespect to hear people try to act as if everybody there is just so ignorant that Marcel is the only one who actually knows anything. And I mean, it was frustrating. I could tell that like the chat was basically full of people who were supporters of Marcel or Be Easy, which that's perfectly fine. I don't expect to come in there necessarily and have a whole bunch of people who are just on my side or rooting for me or coming there specifically to hear me make points on whichever the topic is. Let's see, what else do we see in the chat? He might have read a comment of mine. LOL. I question why he attacks other groups over crumbs. He should go after the feds and corporations. And that's some of the points that I want to get into. They got big mad for sure with us indigenous folks. Well, and then this goes into some of the that goes into some of the arguments and fights which Thomas has been dealing with for the longest, which I didn't even understand about. And I don't know if you guys were paying attention to every bit of it, but Afeni kind of alluded to some of that that was mentioned in there. And it's some of the stuff which I don't know if you guys listened to Amazing Lucas, some of the conversations which he's been talking about between FBA and he said OBA, original Black Americans, which is a new term which I'm just starting to hear. La Senora says, it's like Jason Black. I disagree with him on some things, but I agree on some things, and I'm not gonna cancel him over that. So yeah, there was a ton of Marcel fans, and he was baited by the audience saying "cry more," so he was he's trolling the chat. That's something that I felt like I said in there a couple of times and I never got back to it, in which I'm going to have this conversation with Be Easy. Um, he said that I took a straw man when I said even if illegal immigration or immigration as a whole, even if all of it was just wiped out and every immigrant was just gone, um, then I don't feel like it's going to turn into some kind of material gains for the black community. And he said, "Well, that's making a straw man. Nobody said that. I never said anybody said that. I'm making the point. I'm making the point that I feel like even if you eliminated illegal immigration or immigration as a whole, the powers that be in this country care about free labor. They do not care about giving fair deals to anybody. And so they are always going to find a way to try to find free or cheap labor. I mean, and before there was worrying about different immigrants or whatever, the moment that you had some of the poor whites in this country and some of the freed blacks in this country actually start trying to build and work on things, improve situations, the powers that be, the major business owners, always found ways to try to strike up ways to put one group against another group. Because one thing that's always been a constant in America is you've always had to have what's called a muckraker. You've always got to have an underclass. You always have to have that. And that's something that has not changed over time. And I don't feel a lot of people who are in the FBA community factor that in. If it's not going to be black people, they're going to import somebody else to do that. Now, when they say, yeah, taking black people's jobs, well, a lot of black people are have moved into more skilled professions. That and I think I saw somebody in the chat saying, what you want to go out there and you want to go be a landscaper and all that, which I think that's stereotypically unfair also to categorize so-called low skill jobs as in like landscaping or being nannies and things like that, or just working in warehouses and things as, oh, well, these are some immigrant jobs, picking fruit and things like that. If you want, if Black Americans want those jobs, there's nobody that's going to stop them. I mean, out here in California, you can easily show up at a Home Depot too, and hop on a truck. Somebody will hire you and give you work for the day. You can easily go out there and apply for a job to go pick fruit out in the fields in 105-degree heat. You can do that. Those jobs are not being taken away. They're not going to not hire you. It's a large fraction of the Black community is not going to do those jobs. And a big part of it is our history in this country dealing with slavery. Those type of jobs were used as a way to demean and disrespect us as a community. So no matter how much they're paying, even if they pay astronomical amounts, a lot of Black people are not going to go do those types of jobs. Now, the jobs that are left that you're going into is what? Construction, and you can still get on the construction site. Now, you can argue that some of the undocumented workers that have came in might have lowered the wages, but you have that same kind of issue going everywhere. And I feel that a lot of FBAs, their complete dismissal of foreign policy leads to some of these just ignoring realities of what are going on. I'm not saying that certain things are not pressures and triggers upon other things, but it's a complete dismissal of the effects of many other things that have to be factored in. It's like doing a math equation and you're not putting all the numbers in. If you're not putting all the numbers in, it's not going to add up to the correct amounts. And I felt it's a lot of that goes on. That's everything is not being factored in. Let's see, what else is the chat saying? Yeah, cheap labor, big profits. Like one thing that I said in there, I said, if the goal, if what they wanted was to end illegal immigration, it could be done overnight, very easily. I remember being in Italy. The 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 immigration was strictly controlled for a long time, very easily. Now, some of those restraints which they had or have been repealed back, and so you started seeing the numbers flood up. Also, you started seeing big business push to try to get more labor in, whether that is legally or illegally. I mean, when I was in Italy, if you didn't have a codice fiscale, you could not do a lot of things. You couldn't get a phone. You couldn't rent an apartment. You couldn't do anything. How do you live in a place if you don't have paperwork to live there? How do you live in a place if you don't? I mean, what? It's not like when I was in Italy, there's this burgeoning homelessness population, and you can just build up these tents and decide you're going to go to work from living in the tent. It doesn't work that way. Also, a lot of the immigration and things are controlled by the mafia, so it's tightly controlled on how those things work. Um, Yeah, Rick says Marcel may know about reparations and Black history, but immigration was definitely not his strong suit, to put it lightly. Well, he brought up how, well, yes, how immigration was used. It's all a part of white supremacy. Yes, I do know that. I mean, and a lot of us know that. I just didn't like the fact of how he was so patronizing and not allowing a person to actually speak and have a fluid conversation. Um, Yes, a lot of different immigrant groups, whether that be the Irish and Italians and all those, were incentivized to come in this country so that you can have cheaper labor, and so that they didn't have to hire Black people. Yes, okay, we do understand that that happened, but we're not talking about the 1910s and the 1920s right now. We're talking about immigration, which from the major corporations, they don't, whoever they can get the cheap labor from, that's who they're going to take it from. It doesn't matter if they got it from a cheap Russian, which when I worked a warehouse job, I worked in Kansas City, we had undocumented Africans, undocumented Hispanics, we had undocumented people from the Middle East, we had undocumented Russians, we had a bunch of undocumented people. I mean, if ICE would have pulled up in there, I mean, they could have got medals. How many people that they could have locked up? I'm not advocating for that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that major corporations care more about, because if you look at business in general, the largest cost to any business is labor. Labor is always your most expensive cost. And so every business is always trying to figure out how can they cut labor. And if you go back into what is his name? Was it Jack Dorsey? Well, I don't know. I'm blanking on this man's name. Let me find it real quick. Find it real quick. Um, it was a billionaire by the name of, because I did a video on him not too long ago. But this billionaire completely um, redefined big business in this country. And where's it? Hold on one sec. Jack Welch. That's who I'm thinking of. Jack Welch, the man who's known to have broken big business. Let me see. Where was that in the chat? Trying to get myself caught back up. Well, and another thing that I heard them bring up that didn't make sense to me. And I made this argument here on this channel before. The Black community itself has to build up and I do agree. There's a certain amount of building up and working on things internally first. Uh, but at the same time, if the CBC is not standing 10 toes down to get things done, how do you expect for, oh, well, it should be the Hispanics, the white Hispanics, they need to do it. If we're not doing for ourselves, I mean, if I'm not doing for myself, how can I expect anybody out there to jump ahead and do it for me? I need to handle my own business first. And even if you're, and coalitions isn't about being buddy buddy or necessarily loving each other. That would be nice if you do, but that's not always what entails a coalition. Sometimes you need something that this other person has. And if you have, for instance, if the Black community voted in mass and stayed on code as said, you'll be able to say, oh well, on this bill you need us. You need our X amount of votes, our 20 votes, our 30 votes, our 40 votes. If you do this, we will give you our votes. And that's how you're able to work in coalitions and get things done. It's not just about this buddy buddy and loving each other and kumbaya shit. That's not how this works. All this stuff works on leverage and power. And if you do not have leverage, you do not have power, you don't get very much done. I mean, when the comment when he made about, oh, when he said, well, that guy, he's with the blacks. Did he also note that that same person was shitting on other Hispanic people? They were Mexican shitting on other Mexicans also, showing that it's they don't even have a brown alliance or a brown loyalty to their own countrymen. When they were talking about how, oh, the other ones, they're brown, dirty, and ugly. And it's just another thing when I was talking about the splintering. Oh, here, let me. I'll hold that for a minute and let me get caught up with the chat. Well, in California, talking about the Chinese, a lot of the Chinese have, some of the Chinese have been here for a very long time. I mean, you go back to the days of the gold rush and the railroads being built in California. There was always a certain amount of, at least in particular, the Chinese Asian community. Um, and one thing that I don't feel was being factored in when I was talking about, when he's talking about, oh, well, these communities are splintered. This is where nuance comes in. Who is being splintered? We're not. If you want to expand it out to, oh, out of millions of people, yeah, they don't all agree. Okay, cool, but that's not how things work. When the Native Americans fought for reparations, it was the chief of the tribe, the leader or leaders of the tribes who were out on the forefront fighting for this. If you look at any of the civil rights stuff, it was multiple black leaders. Now, as far as the reparations activists, how many in the black community are that are pushing for reparations that are on the level of a Martin Luther King? Because that was something which Pamela brought up, or Denise. I'm not sure which one she prefers, but she brought up the fact of yeah, they said, yeah, even in the church, only 5% do it. Yeah, the 5% that does it is the leadership. And even if you try to go into the church, that's a bad example also, because in order for that church to stay afloat, it's just not a pastor and deacon and a choir and all that. It needs the tithes of the members. So therefore, it's showing that everybody is having an active participation in part in accomplishing this goal. It's the same thing with the civil rights era. Though you had all of these different civil rights leaders, and whether it be and whether it be somebody who was a Martin Luther King, or whether it's somebody like a Harry Belafonte who was a musician and an actor, whether it's somebody like a Jim Brown who was an athlete. How many people in the black community who have platforms, who have actual real power, who can go outside and say, you know what, I have a statement to make, and you're going to have every reporter from every major news agency out there to listen to what you have to say. We do not have any of the people who, the Jay-Z's, the Beyonce's, LeBron James's, even if you say trying to think, what's his name, Al Sharpton. Even Al Sharpton could get major headlines. We don't have one of those people who are pushing for reparations who is at that level to push that thing. And that makes a huge difference. If you don't have the pillars or people who have leverage and power in your community to get these things pushed, then they're not going to listen to you. I don't care how many Marcel Dixons are out there. I don't care how many um I don't care how many Be Easies or Tariq Nasheeds or Yvette Carnell. I don't care how many of those people are out there. All of them put together do not have the leverage to push this. All you're going to be doing is screaming at politicians. And this is what I was trying to things that I was trying to bring up because it instead of getting emotional and pissed off, that's not an excuse. Instead of getting like that, then you can actually start trying to look at strategy. And that's something that Nick was trying to bring up. Strategy. How are you going to do X? How do you fight against this? How do you fight against that? How do you stop big business from going after cheap labor? I mean, um, they have the H-1B1 visas and all kind of other visas that'll be put in. Even if you say, well, we're going to go against illegal immigration, there's still going to be somebody will decide, well, hey, I need a couple over here to help me out. So here, make a bill so that I can get this many people in to do that. And you can still do your wall and all that other stuff. And I just think that they're not understanding so many nuanced things. And that's why there's such a problem. Hey, babe, I see you. Hopefully you're safe out there. Um, let's see what the chat is saying. I see Black Oars lawyers suing corporation, police, and banks. They won tens of millions in lawsuits, and big corps are giving 60 billion in grants on loans. They should have kept pressure and won. Yeah, and that's why I was saying you need organization. If you organize as a block, then you can wield that power. And like I said, that the numbers are low as far as the black population. And Marcel was like, no, actually, they undercounted by 4 million. Okay, I don't care. They undercounted 4 million, 5 million, 6 million. That's still not a high percentage. And percentages don't. If you look at South Africa for the longest had a much higher population than the white Afrikaners. That still did not automatically give them power and control. It took for a movement and leadership to be able to push and affect that change. It took for a leader to have enough a high enough platform to galvanize enough people to actually have push and leverage. The black community right now, just being honest, are not formed right. They're not formed that way at this point. Now, can any of the people which I named before become that leader? Can they galvanize the people to that level? It's possible. But as we sit at the current time, that is not the reality. And that's what I was trying to get across to the people on that panel. How come no one ever deports the Chinese? I'll keep asking that question until I get an answer. The reason why that's not going to happen is because, okay, I'll go ahead and answer. The reason why is because a lot of the U.S. debt is owned by China. A lot of it. The fact that China has that amount of debt, I know you hear about all the tariffs and all this other stuff, but when it comes down to it, it's about the debt and things like that. Since they have that amount of debt, they use some of that capital, and I mean forgiving certain amounts of debt if this is overlooked and that's overlooked. And so, since there has been power in the Chinese community, in particular out of Asian Americans, especially in California, there is a certain amount of grace that is given to that community as a whole. Now, I'm not saying this to be, to try to offend anybody, but it's just the reality. Let's see. That they try to lead Caucasians over Hispanics here, California only outnumber them. Marcus loves the shut up, Wheezy. Shut up. Oh, that's another thing. Some of the FBA are fighting another battle. They believe that they're the indigenous Americans. They believe that they were always here, that most of them didn't come over through slavery, that at some point Europeans just came over and enslaved them and took over their plantations and a bunch of different stuff like that. I wasn't going to go and navigate all that stuff because I could hear where that conversation was going, because that's a whole, I was trying to stay on topic with what we were talking about. But that is a whole nother animal to go through. It sounded like Marcel was advocating for a police state to kick out all refugees and limit down immigration. I think he wants to limit competition for crumbs. Yeah, I agree. I think that it's kind of the same thing how I see with a lot of abortion activists. A lot of abortion activists push so hard to get rid of Roe versus Wade. And they're pushing even harder right now. If they were able to get Trump to agree to a nationwide ban, it would guarantee that they would lose the election. But because their foot is so on the pedal for this issue and the blinders are on, they're not, the strategy is being thrown out the window. And I feel like a lot of people are focusing on emotion and their passion, not strategy. For me, I've come to the conclusion a while back that I don't think that America's ever going to pay reparations. And if they do pay reparations, it's going to be pittance. It's going to be small, it's going to be just enough change for them to say, we paid you reparations, now shut the fuck up. And I'm talking about maybe for a couple of years, $10,000 checks or something like that. Not anything on a significant scale. And then you have to ask yourself, would that make you happy if you just got a check no matter how shitty the check is? Or are you trying to hold out for a check that you feel would be up to the level of what you feel you deserve? Either way, I don't see that happening, because especially at this point in the empire, the United States is losing its grip. It's losing its power. And the only thing that has kept the United States afloat, since they are just running nothing but nonstop debt. And that nonstop debt can go on for eternity as long as they have the military might and the petrodollar under control. The moment the United States loses the petrodollar, the moment that other countries feel like we can fight the United States and the United States loses its hegemony, that debt will be called in instantly. And as soon as that debt's called in, this country would basically collapse. Now, with many people in power knowing that, do you feel in any way that they're about to give away trillions of dollars to add on to how badly that they would be screwed over as a nation? Also, the fact of how many racist people in this country, especially on the right, would rather die before they see a dime go to black people. And I'm like, how do you guys not factor any of this in and how you're going to do it? I know it's pervasive it's persuasive to say in the black community, it is a debt that is owed. And it is a debt that is owed. That works for us. But how do you sell this? Because this is what you have to do. This country, United States, is controlled by white people. point blank, period. And I'm talking about control from the level of the military, control of the TV stations. Now you can talk about, you can get into which type of white people, but let's not let's not get it twisted. This country is completely controlled by white people. So in order for you to get these reparations, whether you're getting it through the banks, whether you're getting it through land, whether you're getting it through local government, state government, whether you're getting it through federal government, whether you're getting it from wealthy families who own slaves, one way or another, or through the court systems, you are going to have to convince white people to give that money. And I don't think that factors in to any of the decisions that are being made and pushed. Um, my position on reparations is I do agree with them as far as saying reparations in the US, especially if we're talking about forced slavery, should be paid for descendants of slaves. Now, you can have different categories for if you were going if you are not a descendant of slave and you came in and you still had to go through Jim Crow and discrimination and redlining and those different things like that, okay, that can be a whole nother category of how things should be done. Maybe you might be a Haitian and you came over here in, I don't know, in the 50s and you were able to buy land and that land was stolen away. Reparations should be owed to you also. It's a different reparations, that's why I think that it would get more nuanced into going into all that. I also believe in reparations for, I believe in supporting our brothers and sisters throughout the diaspora, whether they are in Haiti, whether they're in the Dominican Republic, whether they are in Cuba, whether they are throughout, all of South America. I do support that. Whether they're in the UK, I support their claim. Whether they're in France, I support their claim on reparations. Denmark, I mean, you could go throughout all of the Western powers because they all had a hand in it. And even if you wanted to ask for a certain level of reparations from Cameroon, from Ghana, from Sierra Leone, from all of the different areas, the Congo, where they were sold away from. I have no problem with it coming from all different directions, or it being done different ways. Whether that's okay, you no longer pay taxes. Where we'll give you land over here, all kind of different things. Now, as long as we're not talking about some grants or loans, that's complete BS. But I support all of those. But supporting them and having a way to manifest them is a different story. I can want to dunk a basketball all I want. But if I don't go out there and do the exercises and put in the work to get there, then it's just talk. And this is my argument, which I make with a lot of people. I see a lot of people who get online and they talk and they get in spaces and they say this and they say that. They maybe have a meeting and they go here, or they go to their city council rep and yell at them, and then you feel good about yourself. But there's no actual leverage there. There's no actual threat there. These people are still going to be elected. And that's the reason why I said there needs to be more education in the community. Because if you're fighting against this in your community, but the rest of the community is still going to vote to put these people in power who are not doing what you are requesting and what you are yelling at them to get done, then how does that help you? It gets you nowhere. Because when this election comes around, whether Kamala wins or loses, you are still going to probably see easily 80% to 90% of Black people who are still going to vote for Kamala and not ask for anything. And I don't feel, what do you do with these obstacles that are here? I don't feel none of the people in the FBA or ADOS crowd are answering these questions. And there for me, that is a huge problem. Because either you haven't thought about these problems to try to figure them out, which means that You're going to get punched in the face and have to go back to the drawing board. Or you have thought about these obstacles and know you can't overcome these obstacles, and you are selling a bunch of people false hope, which that can be even more dangerous. So, I mean, that's my little tangent that I went on so far. Let me see what we're talking about in the chat. Yeah, I do agree. The real divide with minorities is black and brown capitalists against the rest of us. Well, that's something that Feeney brought up. What are you going to do with this capitalist system? Another thing I bring up: if you don't care about foreign policy, and you're not paying attention to these other things, you can scream reparations all you want. If a nuke hits this place, and it's not going to matter because you're not going to exist. If you don't care about these things, your own self-preservation, then asking for a check makes no sense because you won't be here to receive it. Or even if they say, you know what, hey, the country is completely defunct. Yeah, here, we'll give you trillions of dollars. Now it's going to cost you 50,000 for a loaf of bread. I just feel like there's a lot that's not being answered, and a lot that's not being talked about and brainstormed all the way through. Um, Thomas says it doesn't help when FBA, Freedmen, ADOS, and Native Black American orgs can't agree on the strategy. BLM and Black farmers did more for their community. Exactly. Well, I mean, it's an argument you can make on BLM, or I would well, BLM before it became an org. I would agree because when they were pushing on the ground, I feel like there was a lot of these officers who at least got brought to trial would have never gotten brought to trial, would have never gotten light on their stories without BLM. Now, what it devolved into is a different story. Black farmers did more for their community. I agree. And that's the reason why I said there needs to be a building outside of the system instead of focusing on politics. And I think that's probably one of the things which got under Marcel's skin because there's still faith in this system. Now, you can believe it all he wants. I've actually done the research into seeing how these people are funded and knows what happened with when you get into Congress. Yeah, you talk about the power. Even if you got Clyburn's seat, do you really think that they're going to bring any reparations bill to the floor? No, it's not. And what would and if you keep fighting against your speaker, more than likely you're just going to get censured and thrown out. So you get there and nothing gets accomplished because you have no strategy. You just think, I'm just going to keep yelling and yelling and yelling and say, you owe me my check. You owe me my check. That's not going to, just because somebody owes you something, don't mean that they're always going to give it to you. And there are a lot of people who have gotten screwed over and stiffed out of what they deserve because they didn't have an actual plan on how to accomplish it. I mean, think about how many times people go to the trial where they know somebody's probably guilty and they're like, okay, but can you prove it? You got to prove that a person is guilty to get that guilty verdict. And it's the same thing with reparations. If you want it, you need to prove it and you need to make it manifest. And also, leverage matters. If you don't have leverage on these politicians, you can't put the heat on them. Especially when we have so many people in the Black community who gonna just automatically vote for these people anyway. Many of them are not even gonna invest into looking what their platforms are, who they're backed by, any of that. And we're like, honey, who did we vote for last time? Oh, we voted for Johnson. Oh, okay, Johnson. Because some of these states, a lot of these states have mail-in voting. So they're not gonna really care about listening to you because they're just going to vote for the person who they know. And a lot of these older voters, because their quality of life is set a certain way, they're not feeling some of the bumps and bruises that we are. I'm not saying all, because there are plenty of older people who are struggling just as much as the next, maybe even something more than some of us. But there are a lot of people in that Generation X baby boomer generation who are not feeling those same bumps and bruises. So it is more important for them to be able to say, "Ooh, I voted in the first black woman." Some of them, that matters more to them than anything that you're talking about. And if you don't think about that and try to figure out a counter to that and how to push your message out there, then what are you doing? Um, Wheezy says reparations would go a long way if the government actually fixed impoverished minority community, but sadly will never happen as keeping us down is a part of the plan. That's my point that I keep uh, trying to come back to. And when I have these conversations with some of them, I want to ask these questions. I want to see, what are you going to do about this? And if they push back, well, what are you going to do? I don't have an answer. That's why I'm asking you. I see some of these things as insurmountable obstacles unless things on the ground can materially change, unless you see some galvanizing of Black support behind these issues, and you see a collaboration and a partnership and a teamwork that I have not seen in my lifetime. Unless you can get to that, I see no possible way of getting any of this stuff done. And then, you know, the ignorance about foreign policy. Um, as long as things are going to be crappy in these other countries with sanctions and all this stuff like that, just be prepared. You're going to keep having, whether it's illegal immigration or legal immigration, that is going to keep happening. It is going to be a fact. And that's what some of these people, they're not living in the realm of what the reality is. And I look at it this way: if you don't want to face the problems that you're facing, I can't just decide, you know what, I want to go out there and run 5 miles. If I haven't been running and practicing, if my knees are bad, if my back is bad, all those things like that, I can't just will myself to do it. It takes a certain amount of your body needs to be able to do this. You need to prep, you need to prepare, you need to plan. And I don't see that going on with this movement. I don't see the preparation and the organization and all of these things. Um, wouldn't the Freedman Bank and 40 acres and a mule be a federal broken promise that reparations can use against the feds as collateral for reparations? Oh, yes and no. I've heard an argument, which I don't know how true it is, because granted, I'm not in the legal field. Um, I heard Judge Joe Brown make the argument that it would have to go through Congress because of the statute of limitations and how far down the road that it's been on reparations. So if it has to go statute of limitations, if it's going by statute of limitations and it has to go through Congress, then no, they would not be able to do that. I mean, but think about how many Native American tribes which didn't get reparations. I mean, many of them who just, okay, well, you can keep the little bit of land that you have. Um, because that's another thing. I don't think when people say, oh, the Native Americans got reparations, some did, but there are plenty of tribes who didn't get reparations. There are a couple who are still on paper, still at war with the United States right now. Keep in mind, the United States broke over 400 treaties to the Native Americans. They broke over 400 treaties to the Native Americans. What makes you think that it's going to be any different with paying their debt to us? Let's see. And how much is that reparations check going to be? Well, a good point that was brought up to me the other day. They said, in California alone, how much would 40 acres be? I mean, how much does 40 acres actually cost? In fact, that's a good argument. Let me look up that. I'll look this up, or if anybody's in the chat that can pull that up before me, go on ahead and toss that in there. But how much would Woo. Some estimates suggest that this land could be worth up to, Some estimates suggest that this land could be worth 640 billion today, highlighting the enormous economic potential of the 40 acres promise. Let me see, how much will 40 acres be in California? So, in Lottie, for example, let's say a 40 acre property in Lottie, California, listed for 1.6 million. So, 1.6 million in Lottie, which is kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Um, so what you were looking at is, I don't know if that will be paid out over multiple payments, multiple years, or lump sum. And is that lump sum going to be taxed? I think a lot of people would be upset about that if it was taxed. But that's saying that easily over 2 million apiece that's going to be given out. And also, where is this 40 acres of land going to be? So you can say 40 acres, but where is the land going to be? Is it going to be okay? Well, for freedmen, if you guys want your 40 acres, then everybody needs to move to South Dakota. I mean, that's possible. Making South Dakota basically a freedman state. I don't know. I'm that's what I'm saying. I'm brainstorming all these things because I don't hear anybody answering any of these questions. I honestly, and you know, I honestly do have respect for what they are trying to do. And honestly, before this dialogue, I had a lot of respect for Marcel Dixon. I felt after the discussion, I felt he's very emotional, um, very patronizing, very disrespectful to somebody who was trying to actually have an intellectual debate with him, who's not even really against him on the reparations. I'm trying to figure out how do you deal with this, this, and this? Because I see these are the hurdles that you are going to face. Now, if you're not going to explain to me how you're going to beat these hurdles, then what are we really doing here? Is this just attention? Is this a grift? I mean, because you gotta, if you're gonna build a house, you need to figure out how much money you're gonna need for materials. If you're gonna hire a contractor, how much the contractor is gonna be, when the contractor is gonna work, where you're gonna live in the time period while the house is being done. Is that do you have a contractor who's just gonna build the foundation? Is that contractor gonna build the foundation in the house? Are they gonna do the electrical? Are they gonna do the plumbing? You gotta actually like hammer out each of these issues and how each thing is going to be done. It's a lot more complicated than just, I want my check. And this is my issue, which I feel is not being answered by many of these people. Now, it could be that they do have answers to all these questions, but all I hear is people getting upset at anybody who's trying to ask and inquire and bring up these points and saying that, well, you're just making excuses for not wanting to get it done. It's not even anybody who's trying to stop you from getting it done. We're trying to see what you see. We're trying to see how do you get across the finish line. Not just seeing a finish line. How do you get there? You don't just all of a sudden have a doctorate. There are steps you have to do, applying to college, going there, doing your classes, doing your homework. There's a lot of things that happen on that process of getting there. And what we're trying to get is, can we get the step by step? Can we get where are we in the proposal of these steps? Where are we in a goal setting, objectives? What objectives are we hitting? How do we measure this? And I'm not seeing anybody who is pushing for this giving answers to any of these things. The most I've seen is a lot of spaces, YouTube channels. Um, I did see what I've seen out of Chicago, and I've seen LA. The only people where there's been any kind of push, and I've seen the Black Congress people, who I remember saying not too long ago, when there's complaints about things that are going on or not going on in the Black community, why is there nobody who's jumping on these people's head now? In defense of some of the reparations activists out here in California, I have seen them go after them. But if you can't formulate campaigns to get these people out of office, not just be against them, no, to get them out of office, to remove them, then you haven't shown me that you have the leverage and power to get to these other things, which are even harder. That's what I'm trying to say. And I know it's a tough conversation, but these are the things which I feel like need to be thought out, need to be talked about, and need to be shown at least steps towards getting to them. I'm not expecting you to just accomplish all this stuff with a snap of a finger, but how do we see that you are working closer to these goals? Let's see. What else? Rick says, I was getting the impression that Marcel and Pamela Denise were thinking that they get closer to reparations under Trump. Yeah, they are. They completely are. I mean, I heard him say, oh, well, the Ice Cube's platinum plan or whatever. Well, is Trump still talking to Ice Cube? Because that was years back. What does a conversation he had back then have to do with what he's manifesting now? I mean, I don't know. So let me know if he is talking to Trump and there are some stuff, then that should be something that you should be trying to campaign on and run on and push the hey, I am trying to work on something. But I believe that they both know for a fact that the Republican Party in no way, no shape, no form would ever put a bill up that would ever get to Trump's desk for reparations. Trump could say, oh, yeah, I would push for reparations, but you got to deal with the Republican Senate and the Republican Congress. I mean, so if you're not getting Republican House and the Republican Senate to put a bill together for reparations, then how do you get it done? Because that's how bills work for those who don't understand it. I know our audience does, but just in case this video gets to somebody who is thinking about the Republican Party. In fact, go around and ask these Republicans how many of them are going. I mean, Tariq was just on with the Republican who put the bill on the floor, or not, who was trying to put the bill on the floor. And then when you asked him, does he support reparations? No, he don't support reparations. All he was doing was he was trying to get that as a vote to try to hold that against Gavin Newsom and the Democrats saying, oh, look, they're trying to give away free money. That's the only goal, because he felt like that would politically hurt the Democratic Party and Democrats by pushing for reparations. He doesn't support it. And he knows that in California, it's going to be an uphill climb. And it probably could be a political loser for a lot of these people. But that works out for them because it puts pressure on the Democratic side, not the Republicans. It gives them just like Republicans have to fight supporting abortion and that being a bill that goes against them. Reparations will be something that's going to be a drag on the ticket. Sorry, a little dust there. It's something that would be a drag on the ticket on the Democratic side. Now, I'm not saying that that's a reason to run away from it. I'm saying that you got to find a way to sell this to people who are not already in the camp. Because one way or another, you got to ask somebody else for this. You still have to ask somebody for this. And you're going to need some kind of allies. Because where are the numbers going to come from? If this is going to go from Congress, you're going to need the votes. You don't have what 60 you don't have what 60 people who support reparations right now in the Senate. You don't have 240 votes, or you don't have 240 FBAs sitting there in Congress. So you're going to have to get votes from other people. I mean, this thinking sounds so disjointed to me that anybody who's asking you about these different things, you're not factoring them in. And Marcel, who is somebody who is running for Congress and who has ran for Congress, it's like, if you get the Congress, you're gonna need allies. Who the hell in Congress is going to say yes? I'm going to vote for reparations when you being there, or who's going to co-sponsor that bill? Because as being a junior Congressperson, you're not just getting your bill to the floor. You're going to need a co-sponsor from a senior senior congressman. And when they talk about the inside outside game, I understand all about the inside game. That's the reason why I don't believe in it. See, he was speaking as if like we're just some political idiots. We don't know anything about history. We don't know anything. We're just all like head in the sand, and while patronizing everybody else about how smart he is and he knows, and the chat, oh, he's on fire. Yeah, it sounds good. That's what we call, when you look into the scripture, looking for pastors or sermons with itching ears. You're looking for something that sounds good to you instead of hearing the real and the facts. Anybody can go and find somebody that says what they want to hear. But it's more important to get the actual facts of the reality to assess the situation and deal with the situation accordingly. If you have stage 4 cancer, if you don't know that you have stage 4 cancer, then how do you fight against it? How do you survive if you don't want to deal with the reality that's there? I agree. Some Native Americans also were given barren lands. Chris H says, I don't think you guys. I didn't think you guys were coming on. Debate was brutal. You did good with the time you had. Yeah, and it was tough to respond to stuff because, I mean, when you're in a debate format, you kind of have to let the other person sit there and talk. And I know we're getting short on time, and the only way that I'm going to actually be able to respond is I got to hop in and say what I need to say. Respect to Pamela Denise, but there were some times where I felt like she was making arguments against stuff that nobody on the panel was making the argument. Now, I get it that those are the typical arguments that are brought up when dealing with reparations and things like that. But when we got so many people and we don't have a lot of time, I feel it makes more sense to just deal directly with what each other is saying and try to respond to that. Thomas said the 5 tribes are enjoying economic growth, and now Oklahoma Governor Stitt becomes threatened. Now he advocates for dismantling sovereignty and makes native wards of the state. Ew. I wouldn't have figured he'd do that. Let's see. Tariq advocates for cold hard cash and reparation payments. Oh, I understand. But how do you get there? You can advocate all you want, but how do you get there? Game.film, what is up, my brother? Chris H says Marcel Dixon was half ignorant, half informed. If it were up to me, I almost would not vote Marcel Dixon. The only thing appealing about him is his zeal and drive to help Black people. I agree. I don't think that Black people supporting the Republicans and Trump understand the sentiments of the Republican Party, especially regarding reparations. I think that they've grown up around, a lot of those people have grown up around so many races that they just don't, they don't even care. I don't know exactly what they're thinking. I really don't. I can't speak for other people's thinking. I know, like when I hear some people who are in New York, who black people who want to support Republicans, um, I look at it as it's because you, and even out in California, I'm like, it's because you didn't. I lived in a full red state where the Republicans at certain points had the governor's house, um, it had the state senate, and it had the House. I mean, under Sam Brownback, he almost bankrupted the state. I mean, he had Kansas in a lot of problems financially. And honestly, if you give Republicans full power, they will tank whatever you have. They will completely destroy things. Are Democrats horrible and corrupt? Yes, completely. Both of them are horrible. That's why I don't even care about voting. But one thing you can guarantee is with Republicans, they are going to completely sell you out to major corporations, and they care nothing about you in any shape or form. The Democrats are going to virtue signal that they care about you and just sell you out a little bit less than they are. That's the only difference. I mean, in my opinion. Thomas, I'm not entirely sure on Ice Cube plan. It's been a while since I looked at it, so I honestly don't remember. Negras tormentas. Too much electoral politics will corrode your mind. I agree. The chat intellectually was in a bit of a bad shape. Also, like I've said before, back to that video, and I just direct anybody back to that video where I said we're a black community, we need to have a conversation. And I think that's the one where somehow we got on the military, and me and Chris had our little mini dust up. But before that conversation, it was a lot that was said in there. And I might go back and go and isolate that. John, what's up, John? Said, yeah, Marcel in a lot of ways just a reformist. He was talking like AOC, like we got to work within the system, but at the same time, he hates the duopoly all over the place. I mean, when you've been told that this system is the way you do things, I don't think a lot of these people understand the power dynamics of the wealth that's behind this and how corrupted this system is on a higher level. That's the reason why somebody like an AOC, which you can make an argument that she was already soft and full of it before she got to where she got. But how right now she sounds like a junior Nancy Pelosi. And the reason why is because when you get in that position and you realize I can't by myself just affect this change that I was thinking. And since I can't affect this change automatically that I was thinking, many of them are like, well, I can sit here and make the good check, and be able to benefit from this life and try to make little minor incremental changes. I mean, it's better than nothing. And a lot of them, that's what they do. So they capitulate. And that's what happens to a lot of people when they get to office. They just realize the overwhelming monster that they're fighting against. And they just either they fight and get crushed and thrown out of office, or sometimes they don't even have to fight. Sometimes they just have to do mild complaining, and that's enough where they get crushed and thrown out of office. But a lot of people see what the system really is. And I call it's the same thing as like you grab the tentacle of a monster in the dark. Then you click the lights on and you realize that monster is as big as a skyscraper. It's not the fight you thought you had. And I think that when people actually do get elected, they understand that. I mean, when I was going through, like, because I went through all 535 people in the House and all 100 senators at one point in time and looked up every single donation that's on the books, not the ones off books, of course, but every donation, and then cross reference that with their votes. And it's clear to see exactly what's going on and who's controlled by who and who's doing what and who goes out there and virtue signals and act like they're really tough for a moment to keep the people who are uninitiated and don't understand what's going on a glimmer of hope, and then they will tuck their tail on the next issue, and then somebody else pops up. So it gives you this no, see the squad, they're fighting for us, but it's a game. It's a big game that they're playing. And if you're a single issue voter, like a lot of these FBAs, you're not gonna understand that. Even with even with the immigration thing, they could stop immigration if they wanted to, but it just sounds convenient. It's like Republicans ran on being against abortion for all those years. I don't think that they ever really thought that it would get to a point where they would actually have to sign the bill into law. I think plenty of them had no real intentions on pushing it. They just did it because they knew that's what their voters wanted, and they were going to virtue signal the whole way until the dog actually caught up with the car. Saul Good says nobody's getting shit without organization and a real fight. Not money, not healthcare, not even mandated wage increases. The powerful have chosen a police state clampdown to popular anger. And I honestly believe that even the people who are organizing and protesting for labor and all that, once they figure out a lot of the signal issues and stuff with a lot of the automation that they have planned, they're going to make a lot of people obsolete. And so thinking some of these strikes are going to lose a lot of their power once they have these machines online. And I think that is the goal. Growing up in Texas, a lot of brown folks think just because you wine and dine with white folks, they will ultimately listen to your concerns. And I'm seeing that with Marcel and Pamela. I agree. I think the same thing out here in California. You got you got a lot of Hispanics in office and having positions, but are they really? They may be getting power on immigration right now, and they're getting some of their way on immigration, and that's because it's mutually beneficial for these private corporations to get cheap labor. But try to get anything else. Try to actually get healthcare. Try to get some of these things you actually need. Try to get lower housing prices. Which, speaking of that, Gavin Newsom vetoed that bill about expanding out for undocumented people to get that 150,000 grant. Which, for those people saying, "Oh, they just giving them money," they're not giving them the money. It would be a grant anyway. That's the reason why a lot of the people who are eligible for it, who are not undocumented, that's the reason why the numbers are so low on people who qualify for it in the first place. Because you got to have the money and capital to be able to pay that back. And that's 150,000 down on the house. That's not like, oh, I'm gonna go find $150,000 house, which you cannot find out here. You can't just find a $150,000 house. Okay? So more than likely that 150,000 is going to go to a house that's 600, 700, 800,000. So you're going to need the capital, the rest of that capital put up for that 600, $700,000 house, and have the money to be able to pay back that 150,000 grant, or I mean, not grant, but loan that is going to be requested in about 5 to 6 years down the road. So it's a lot more complex than a lot of these people really factor in, and I just it's frustrating having conversations with people who are so emotional that they don't listen to somebody who is on their side but trying to have a nuanced conversation. And I mean, it's a reason why teams practice against each other. You practice against each other so you can try to sharpen yourself, so that when you go against the actual opposition in the real game, you can win. You know, the conversations with us is the practice to get you there. But if you're not, it's kind of like somebody who on the basketball court, they're only dribbling with their right hand. And yeah, they're scoring all in practice. But the one time they face a defender that forces them to use their left and only their left, now they're struggling. And basically, in a sense, I'm trying to help build up the right and the left hand. Because if you're not dealing with all these other issues, then you're gonna fall flat on your face when those issues come up. Rick says, I honestly didn't mind the debate, but there was quite a bit of brown and immigrant bashing for no reason. Really, what do those poor people have to do with getting reparations for Black people? I think they believe that the money that is spent towards housing undocumented people and court costs and stuff like that is taken away from possible reparations money. I think that's where some of it comes from. I think that there's a lot of false information about how much money is going to migrants or asylum seekers. I think that's another part of it. Um, I think also it's it's anecdotal stories. You ran into this person who said, well, you're not going to be able to do nothing without the brown vote. So you're taking this one person and you're putting that across the whole community. Oh, well, this person felt that way towards us, so I'm just going to act that way towards all of them. And I'm like, that mentality and that logic is what's been used against Black people, saying that, oh, well, all of them are loud or all of them are criminals or, you know, why are you stereotyping whole groups of people off of your interactions with handfuls? There are plenty of Hispanics who may be racist. There are plenty of Hispanics which love Black people. There are plenty who are willing to help. There are a lot of Black people who don't want to help Black people. I mean, when it comes to a lot of these Crips and Bloods and folks and Gangsters Disciples, the Black Lives Matter to them? Not really, because they're willing to put a hole in each other in a heartbeat over the wrong color or being in the wrong neighborhood. And I'm not saying that's all people are dealing with that, but that's something that you can find people who don't like you in every walk of life. Like I said, I've had more physical violence and guns put in my face from people who look just like me than anybody else. And so if we're so hardcore jumping on the times where there's divisions with other groups of people while ignoring some of the divisions or fights that we deal with our own people, that's I don't know. It's frustrating because you're expecting other people to treat you with more respect than you may treat other people within your own demographics. Now, I love Black people. I try to treat them with respect. I try to help them out. But every Black person ain't me. Every Black person don't operate that way. There are plenty of Black people who don't like no other Black people. Black American, Black immigrant, Black freedman, Black whatever. And there are plenty of white people who don't like other white people, don't like Black people, don't like Asian people. But you can't focus on, well, I had these two who treated me bad, so now F all of them. And I saw a lot of that went on. Let's see. Chris H., I think the migrants are a bit of a scapegoat. Were Black people advocating for these things they needed before the migrants showed up? Because Black people are economically deprived before the migrants. To be honest, I don't remember seeing a lot of the reparations push before before a lot of the migrant stuff. Now, hold on one second. Yeah, I am sweating a little bit. Let me push my fan over here. No, not quite pointed right. Damn, what's it pointed up? All right, hopefully that'd be better. It is super hot out here, so got a little bit of a sweat going, mostly on my arms, but oh, I got a little sweat there, but I'll be all right. Yeah, it's been really hot out here, Yanina. That's part of it. Um, I'll tell you right now at okay, it's down to 80 right now, but it was 99 today. What else we got? Yeah, I've been treated shitty by many Mexican Americans who think they are superior because they're second and third generation, but still look beaners. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I'm trying to remember what was it? I think they were talking about people from Oaxaca. I think those are the people who the so-called white Latinos, as they say, which I'm like, do you realize those people who are lighter complex, they're not white Latinos. Like white Latinos are white. Like I know in Puerto Rico, you see plenty of Latino. I mean, oh, in Mexico too. Canelo. You got Saul Canelo Alvarez, who is a white Mexican. And so those are real white Mexicans, lighter complected. That's not white. But when you're dealing with some of those people in the South, they got a whole different way that they process and view things. I had one of my best friends who lived in North Carolina, where he looked at there's only black and white people, and if you're can be classified as white in any kind of way, then you're white. So that would mean Arabs, Asians, Hispanics. They just throw all of them into the white category. Oz says, when you belong to a strong neighborhood, you can judge all strangers by the standard of the neighborhood and not by color, creed, or demographic. Yeah. Yeah, everybody's always, I mean, I agree, Thomas, everybody's always fighting. But what I was saying about as far as not immigration, but as far as reparations, in order for reparations to actually get somewhere, there has to be some level of force that's going to force the issue. And I don't believe that the current movement has the necessary force to force the issue. Now, I love to be proven wrong. I would love to be proven wrong on that issue. But until I am proven wrong, I'm just giving my analysis of what I see as the current situation. Hey, Ruby, good to see you. Oh yeah, and I had to update because we shared about that story in Aurora about the complex being taken over and all that. Which I know your story that you're telling me about reminded me of it, your Dina, which that's jacked up if that's the case. But what we found out with the Aurora situation is that's not exactly what happened. What happened there is you have a landlord who is actually under charges right now of being a slumlord and has neglected a lot of his properties, who lives out of state. And the people that you see with the guns and all that, they were going, and that was some kind of issue that was with one unit, which is believed to have been another Venezuelan. So that would be a a Venezuelan versus a Venezuelan about something else. It wasn't about taking over the apartment complex. And all of that got spread by a Republican mayor who was spreading false information, which got that spread all the way throughout all of social media, Elon Musk, and all these people just outright spreading false information. But you're not hearing a whole lot of people come out and say, hey, well, we reported that information falsely. I'm here to say, yes, we did report that information and it was false. And so that's one of the things that I like to be able to do, to say, you know what, hey, we got something wrong, and I don't have too much pride to not be able to fess up to that. Let's see. Thomas says, good points, Marcus. When it comes to sovereignty and treaty rights, most natives are on board. The Black community can find common grounds too. Honestly believe that if a lot of these people realize that the same person who's oppressing Native Americans, the same person who is oppressing immigrants, be it from Africa, be it the Caribbean, be it Central and South America, wherever, whether that be the Black community as a whole, or even more in particular the lower income part of the Black community, and Black and brown people, hell, even white people. There is a tinge of racism that comes from the top, where they have their beefs with each different groups, but it's basically overall a class issue. It's class warfare. And I would say it's class warfare and it's a touch of racism, but a big part of it, when it comes down to it, it's a class thing. They don't care nothing about none of us. Now, do they actually hate some people more? Yes. But overall, it's a class issue. That is 1000% true. We will never have the force with the boule gatekeeping. The boule, the reason why, and you're not going to get past the boule. The reason why we're not going to get past the boule is because the boule have been incentivized to be at the forefront of these movements. So whatever message comes out of the Black community can be controlled. They don't even have a Black person who's going to get on there and start, well, we need to fix this, we need to fix this. And oh yeah, by the way, this person who runs this corporation is they got to edit all that out. And so they can't control the message that would come out of the Black community if they allowed us to be on camera and to be on these airways and truly speak for ourselves. So they have to screen us and put the boule in charge so that they can have measured control messages out of our communities to control what we're saying. Now, to a certain degree, some of the immigrant populations, they've already done a certain amount of propaganda. Some of that comes from movies and television that's beamed to their home countries and internalizing forms of discrimination, which they don't even realize. Some of it is when they're brought over here, some of the communities push some of this discrimination and the separation. And so a lot of times that can be debunked and decolonized out of people, and you can create allies out of those people. But if you start off with well, they don't like me, and I ran into a couple, and you got that mentality, you're never going to get anywhere. But yeah, it's white supremacy still controlling the narrative, whether it is dealing with immigration or any of our different communities. And I would put that out to everybody who is listening. But I'm also going to be honest, Marcus. I think a lot of Venezuelans and Cubans think that they are white when they are not. Some of the light skins, but not white either. They're also terrible. Oh, I agree. Especially Cubanos and Venezuelans in South Florida. And a lot of that division, goes back to some of the divides under Castro. Before Castro got into power under Batista, because a lot of the capitalist Cubanos were the lighter skinned to white who were very racist, and it was a big division between the black and brown who were in that who were in Cuba, and the same issue with the Venezuelans. I mean, honestly, when you go throughout Central and South America, that same divide of colorism is still used, and that goes back to the system which the Spaniards put into place for the most part. Because if you notice, racism is worse in other parts of South America than it is in Brazil. I'm not saying that it's not in Brazil, but you see it more in countries which were conquered by the Spaniards. And this, like, America goes off of the one drop rule. That's the reason why there's always this beef between a lot of Black Americans and Afro Latinos, because of the way Spain treated race. I mean, if your father was if your father had a European Spaniard mother, I mean, and the father was indigenous, that can make a difference in what category you're put in. So it was like 16 different categories of how they place different people. Not only the fact that, okay, you might be European, Indio, and African. They didn't just, okay, you have those three. It mattered what percentages, how much of that came from your mother, how much of that came from your father, and those are completely different racial groups. The same way how you have in South Africa between mixed people, coloreds, and all that stuff like that. And because of the concept of race and how that construct was set up differently in all those different nations, you had a different understanding on all those things. And when you have immigrants coming in from those different countries, which had a different history and relationship and different social structures of how race is constructed, that's when you have the bump in the heads of cultures. And it has to do with ignorance of both cultures, not knowing what's going on in each other's cultures. Or a lot of times, sometimes it's not even just an ignorance, sometimes it's just a miscommunication. Let's see. Yeah, Venezuelans, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, a lot of the people, especially in the Caribbean, they all have some degree of black blood. I mean, to some of the whitest ones. And I mean, you might even have some of these super pale ones who have like 25% black. And I mean, well, to me, I feel like I can see differences. I can see certain features sometimes. But you know, I guess that depends on different people, how they see different people groups and everything. I've heard Jewish people say that they can tell when somebody's Jewish, and they can tell, oh, if they're Sephardic, if they're Ashkenazi, they can tell if they're Mizrahi, all of those different things. So I mean, it does make a difference. Yeah, Hispanic community is run the same way. Got to be white, Latino, Busano, child of a contra type, looking at you on the lotto. That apparently speaks for, oh God, I can't stand that woman. She's such an embarrassment. They have a cash chart on Google. It's kind of, yeah, I've seen the cash chart, and that's the reason why I try to explain that to people who will. Now, some people are not going to be willing to listen. And Figueroa Figueres is my family. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, it's definitely basically an Olympics of the blood. You know, they gotta try to find the most purest of blood. And that's where that's the reason why it always blew my mind when I would see Mexicans who would be so, no, I'm a Spaniard. I'm Spaniard DNA, and I'm like, how would you wanna? Why would you want to align yourself with the people who enslaved you, who stripped away your name? And the same thing that happened to the Black community happened to the Hispanic community also. The same exact thing. So it's always bugged me that, oh, I'll start going to my Hebrew Israelite stuff, so I'm gonna stop that. Yeah, I don't want to hear all that. But it's the same thing. It's just they're two people are not recognizing that they went through the same thing. I would say three people are all went through the same thing: Black, Latinos, and Native Americans. And when I'm saying Black, I'm talking about the whole entire diaspora or diaspora, depending on the way you like to pronounce it. They all went through the same thing through these same Western colonial powers, except for they just decide to, oh, I see myself as different than you. Yep, they wanna claim the oppressor. They want to be on the side of the oppressor. And I get it. It is embarrassing to say that your people were conquered. Nobody likes to admit that. That's a sore spot for all of us. But we got to learn to not not be embarrassed of our ancestors, no matter if they were conquered or not. It's still our ancestors. They are the reason why we're here. And so um, I've always looked at it this way: don't be embarrassed because your ancestors wanted to be more humane and were not willing to be as dirty and underhanded as the Europeans were, or the Indo-Europeans, as I like to call them, at how they would, how they would take advantage, how they would connive and manipulate and kill off the animals and spread famine and disease to assist in stealing from us. So I went longer than I planned on going. I mean, I think I hit all the points that I wanted to as far as my thoughts on reviewing Sabby's panel. Um, I always say this thing, you know, it's kind of like we're all sit up there, we're all pointing fingers at each other and, yelling at you, yelling at that, and looking for reasons to be divided. Well, we don't realize the person who divided us is sitting over there chuckling in the corner. And they're so happy that we're not turning our gaze back towards them. And they'll be more than happy if they can continue to carry on as long as possible, that we don't ever look back their direction and start asking some questions and start putting some applied pressure to the people it needs to be applied to. But that'll take until there's a great awakening of people to start paying attention to who is the person who really has held you all back, instead of thinking short term, thinking long term, and thinking on a larger scale. Because whether you look at the transatlantic slave trade, and I'm not just talking about the how it affected Black people. I'm talking about because I don't know how many of y'all know this, but there were plenty of Native Americans who were thrown into slavery also, who are right there alongside us. There were five of the thousands of tribes who they took part in the slavery also, but there are still thousands of tribes who weren't a part of it. There are plenty of Native Americans who helped assist and give protection to Black people. The same thing with plenty of people across into Mexico and into Canada. But there was a concerted effort from every part of the only part of Europe that really didn't have a big hand in it, but still had a hand in it. Don't get it twisted. The Russians. But every other part of the Russian, and I'm talking, when I say the Russians, I'm talking about what would have been at that time, before it was actually Russia, just Rus, or maybe it became Russia at that point. But all the areas that would be Western Europe at this time: Italy, France, Denmark, Switzerland, Ireland, all of them had a hand. Every single one of them. It might have been a different hand. This person made the ships. This person made the ropes. This person made mooring gears. This person was the ones who were on the ships. These people. They were the interpreters, and when they went into these areas, these people insured the boats. These people had the auctions. These people. So when you start going through it, you start seeing there was a hand that was to play in all of it. Though the French were not as brutal on their slaves in New Orleans, in Haiti, they were 10 times more brutal. In France, what they did to the Native Americans was horrific. But then that's the same thing you can see um, some of the Spaniards towards the end of their rule in Mexico and Puerto Rico and Cuba and all of those different areas, Dominican Republic, as they got pushed out of there, they weren't as brutal as they were generations before, but they were far more brutal, and they continued that brutality into South America. I mean, I wonder how many people realize that they didn't only enslave, Hispanics in the Americas, that they actually took some, like they started off with putting 500 on a ship and taking them back to Spain to be slaves. And so, I mean, sometimes when I hear some of the old heads and they're like, it's a shame you don't speak Spanish. You're getting mad at them for not speaking the colonizer's language. You should be trying to dig to find out what was your culture before that. What languages did you speak before that? What was your heritage? What was your traditions before that? Don't stop with the identity that, you know, Dominguez, Fernandez, Hernandez, those are not your original names. And so don't get all sold on that. Find out about the Incas, find out about the Mayans, find out about Mesoamerica, find out about where if you were Arawak, Choctaw, whatever you were, find out about all that stuff. That's where your pride should be, and not in the identities that the oppressors gave you. And I say, and then once you've dug into that, double check even more and see if what you got ain't a load of bullshit which they got to try to throw you off the scent. Because the whole world is being deceived. And I'm gonna throw out something my boy Weezy said. Have you ever noticed that in the history books, the good guys have won every single battle? Don't that sound a little fishy to y'all? The possibility that maybe the person who did win was not the good guy. That's like when I started to confirm some things about history and start debunking some of them on my own, is when I looked at histories of multiple nations that wrote about the same account. And you started to see, wait a minute, this is the main story we've been told, but there's some inconsistencies here. This country, that country, that country, and that country are saying something completely different than what this one right here is saying. Mm-hmm. Exactly, Rick. And that's kind of where I want us to start thinking like that and start looking, instead of looking at the small divisions that we have in between us, or the small differences that we have. Always remember, like somebody say, the crabs in a bucket. Well, who the hell put the crabs in the bucket? We keep focusing on pulling each other down, but who put us in the fucking bucket? And if all those crabs focus on who was putting them in the bucket, and started biting there or working together to attack the person who put them in the bucket. And I'm not saying necessarily physically attack, but at least be competitive and strategize against the people who are keeping us all down, simultaneously down. The people who never want to pay atone to what they have done. That's where the focus should be. But yeah, I guess I don't know. I've been on my soapbox. Wow, I went straight hour and 50. Any questions anybody got? And whether that's talking about some of the stuff on the Black Voter panel, whether it's talking about some of the stuff I brought up, just in general, about Black and brown people and the oppressors that we've dealt with, or if you just got something else to talk about. Rick says, I always tell my people, it's okay you don't speak Spanish. It wasn't our language anyway. Or they aren't Christian or Catholic. It's okay. Wasn't your religion either. Yeah. Like I even say, think about this. Catholicism was started out of Rome. Rome, the same people who stole the Bible from somebody else are going to tell everybody what the Bible is talking about. You ain't follow none of that. You ain't follow nothing in there. You were raping, you were stealing, you were killing, and you were stealing land. The Bible even writes in there about how horrific it is to enlarge your boundaries, basically stealing land. And that's the biggest thing that they fucking did. So how can you listen to somebody who is trying to tell you that you should be this when they don't follow nothing in the book? Literally nothing in the book they follow. In fact, Catholics actually make up a whole bunch of extra shit to follow that's not in the book. They don't tell you about saying Hail Marys and going to sit in a thing and talk to a priest and holy water. None of that's in the Bible. And so you can't even listen to them on that thing which they try to stand on because they're not even correct on that. It's like me never playing basketball before, but telling y'all I'm gonna coach y'all how to be the best basketball player ever. So, and how good is it when the white folks tore out Exodus from the book from the black folks? Exactly. Oh, it's another thing. Um, do you know in Egyptian history? Because think about it, the Romans are the same ones who took over Egypt. Why is it that the pharaohs, all that time period and a certain period of the pharaohs, all that gets mixed up, and nobody's able to tell you what time period this pharaoh was in power, or that pharaoh, or when this was built or that was built? And this isn't, I'm not even talking about Bible just for a second. I'm just talking about they intentionally have screwed up Egyptian history to make it hard for you to even be able to follow what the hell exactly even happened. And they didn't only do it with that. They did that with Mongolian history. They did that with parts of Indian history. Because the Greeks and the Romans decided if there's a nation that we know about, we need to go in it and steal and kill and take from it. So the Bible didn't say I had to put the Catholic priest. Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. The Bible don't tell you got to be a priest, and the Bible don't say nothing about you got to be celibate, about being a 80-year-old single woman who's a virgin. The Bible don't tell you to do none of that shit. It don't tell you you're not supposed to drink. It's a lot that it don't tell you. But like I've said plenty of times, for instance, if I went to if I went to Thomas's reservation and I took out some of the or well, because granted, a lot of it's oral history. If I was eavesdropping and heard the oral history, and I start trying to recite it as if I know what the hell is going on, I don't have the understanding and the traditions of his tribe. I don't know them well enough for me to interpret all the nuances and what they're actually talking about. I'm just taking my presupposition and throwing that onto Thomas's people's beliefs and telling everybody this is what it means. Well, what it says, well, when it talks about the celibacy thing, that that honestly, that's Paul. That's not a commandment. That's Paul giving advice. And that's something that also has to be factored in also when you're dealing with the Bible. Which part is advice? Which part is somebody telling a story? Which part is an actual commandment? And since a lot of people in Christianity, they like to read from the so-called New Testament and not read the rest, it's like saying that, you know what, I'm just going to watch the last third of a movie and ignore the first two thirds of the movie. How many of us can watch only the end of a movie and get the real gist of what the hell actually was going on? Especially if it's a really complex story, which the Bible is. Well, what I would say, Nina and Thomas talking about the Egyptians was the Egyptians at that time was basically the superpower of that time period. And so, just like the superpowers of today, it's not going to be a homogenous region. You're going to have people flowing into it from everywhere. Now, I would say that that being said, that there were people flowing into it from everywhere, you still would have had most of the royalty um, being Hamitic and having Hamitic features. Um, but yeah, you would have had if you're going from Hamitic, Shaphitic, Semitic, and Japhetic. If you were talking about those people, then you would have had all three who would have been there. You would have just had Hamitic descent. And for those who are not biblical people who don't know what I'm talking about, you would have had people of African descent, like Nubians, who more than likely would have been the power and the leaders. And you would have had a mixture of Asiatic people to African people to even some Indo-European people who would have been into that area. Just the powers that be. Even if you go back far enough, I mean, what's not factored in about that whole history of that region is um, until about 300 BC or BCE, as they say now, um, there virtually wasn't very many white people that until Alexander the Macedonian, which became the Greeks, until they came into that region and spread across that whole area. That's when you started having a changing of that region. You had the Greeks, which had it, who had power over that region for a long period of time. Then you had the Romans, who took it over for a long period of time. Then you also had later on the what were they called when the Romans split? Byzantine. Then you had the Byzantine who took over that area for a while. Then you had more Arabic people, which Arabic is just a mixture of people moving into that area. So you had for literally like a millennia um, uh, lighter complected people all over from North Africa to what's considered modern day Middle East, which before all of that influx of lighter to basically white people being in that area, a lot of those people were darker. And that's when you started to have the changing of complexions. Now, I'm not saying that it's just a complete bait and switch and complete swap out, which there is a degree of um, the population, initial population, which was basically expelled. There's a degree of that, which some of the African people, for better terms, were pushed south, and some pushed more to the central part of Africa in the Congo region. And I'm saying all of the people who were in that area pushed out to some of the people who were left over, population erasure, whereas enough mixing started to lighting up the gene pool of the rest of the people that was there. That's the same thing which happened in like Ethiopia, for instance. That's the reason why a lot of Ethiopians have a different look than a lot of other people in Africa because of the mixture with Italians. But I don't want to hear about all this stuff. I agree, Dingo. I agree 1000%. The oldest direct descendants that you can find would be in Africa. But I think that's about it. I got to consult with Chris to figure out what time we're gonna go live tomorrow. There's definitely a bunch of stuff, and I don't know. I guess I knew that I definitely wanted to go live tonight, even if it was just for a minute. I honestly thought I was probably only going to sit about 45 minutes, but you guys have a way of just pulling me into all of these other different directions, and you guys get me talking about all kind of stuff. Nina says, isn't that the story of Yaqub, long big-headed scientist? That's something the Nation of Islam gets into, which their whole story doesn't add up. And I thought about doing a video on it. It just doesn't add up because they're talking about Yaqub and going to the Isle of Patmos, and the Isle of Patmos that would have been a Roman territory. So that's saying the Romans would have been in place. So if you're saying Yaqub is the creator of white people and his mad scientist, gene pooling that he was doing, how can you have that if white people had already existed? So there's a lot of inconsistencies with the whole Yaqub stuff. But I could do a video and work on that. I agree, Rick. I agree. Your viewers grew when we were here talking about it, though. I mean, you guys know me. I try to be diverse in a bunch of different subjects, and I don't mind talking about. I don't mind talking about everything. Chris says the history is quite interesting. I used to study a lot of the ancient history to understand biblical prophecies. If you want, one of these days, I don't know if y'all want me to do another prophecy stream because we're getting closer to a lot of that stuff. I can, or if you just want me to direct you guys to certain videos, I can do that also. If you go by Zionist propaganda, they would have more of a right to the land. Exactly. But this is one question that I asked. If now, what is it? Probably about maybe 15 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, the top 3 places in the world that had skin cancer issues were Antarctica, not Antarctica. What is it? The trying to think. It was one of those. It's one of those Norwegian type countries, Sweden, Denmark, one of those up there. And then Number two was Israel, and number three was Egypt. Those are the highest skin cancer rates in the world. Um, Now they've dropped significantly, and that's because of the program which Israel, they have like like um a mandatory program about doing checkups on skin cancer health, and it's like every 6 months or so that you need to be in. I think it might be Iceland. You might be right, Chris H. I think it might be Iceland, which was like number one in skin cancer. But those areas were the top areas, and then when they stopped, when they started instituting this program, that's what's dropped their rates of skin cancer down. But I put it this way: okay, so you say this was your land 2,000 years ago. You didn't have all this skin cancer protection programs and all that. So if you can't survive with all of these modern things, and how the hell did you survive back then? How were you building the granaries? Because a misconception, a lot of people say, oh, the Israelites or the Jews, they were building the pyramids. They weren't building the pyramids. The pyramids were already there. They were building granaries, which, if you understand anything about ancient history, granaries are like one of the most important things you can have because they didn't have refrigeration. So the way that they were able to get food to last longer is they would build these granaries, which would go deep below ground, and so to without having the sunlight and it being cooler, it helped grain and other supplies, wheat, barley, all that stuff last longer. Um, so that's that. Everyone knows it was the Anunnaki that made white people. Mm, I'm not gonna say what I think. I won't say what I think. All I know is the modern explanations they give for white people, they don't add up. Say, well, as people started moving further and further to these different climates, that's when they started changing. Well, why come other people who are moved there who have different melanations never changed? Why aren't if that's the case, then Eskimos all should be white, but they're not. Certain certain parts of Asia which are higher up in elevation. I mean, not elevation, but who are a little bit higher above the equator line, which gets a lot colder, like Siberia. Why aren't they much lighter? So, I mean, it's a lot that they're not explaining, and people don't question it because they've never thought, well, wait a minute, that don't make any damn sense. But I'll leave it there. I like for y'all to I like for the audience to have some things to kind of, a little homework for y'all to study on. Chris H. If you look at the Chris H says if you look at the black loyalists that came to Canada, their complexion has lightened up. Yeah, I guarantee you that complexion is lightened up for two reasons, and it'll lighten up slightly. If you move from different regions where you're not getting as much sun and your vitamin D changes, you will get a little bit lighter, but you won't go from being my complexion to turning blonde hair, blue eyes, and straight or wavy hair. That's not going to change. You're not going to have that level of genetic change. Now, if I lived in if I lived in back in Florida and I'm out in the sun all the time, I'll get much, much, much darker than I am now. And then if I'm living in a place where I'm still out in the sun a good degree here in California, so I do get some sun. But if I was in certain parts of Canada, I would get much lighter than I am now. It just makes a difference on how much a person's outside and inside and climate and all that does factor in. But You won't like completely genetically change. Oh, I completely agree. I don't believe that they've been there as long as they say. I mean, there's stuff that I could say. I mean, I was watching this show, Those About to Die, and Berenice, it has Berenice in there. And for those who know a little bit about who Berenice is, um, it gives a big clue to something that happened at the end of 70 AD, going into um, the Romans, and then with a family. What's the name of that family? Oh gosh, what's the name of that family? I can't remember their names right now. I'm blanking on it, but it is a certain prominent family. Actually, let me see. Roman. How come I can't remember this stuff right now? I used to remember it is a family. I can't remember it right now. No, not the Borgia. But the Borgia, it's fascinating stuff when you get into that. But it is a certain family which lived in Rome, which the modern Ashkenazi Jewish family trace back their roots to this family who claimed that they were the Jews in Rome who took the trek over to what would be modern day Ukraine, Russia area that kind of overlaps into Turkey. So it was like Turkey, Ukraine, Russia type area. What was it called? I can't remember their name, but it was this very I mean, I don't know. I'll be forever trying to dig it up without remembering. But the Ashkenazi population, like it says that they are basically the founding. Oh, wait a minute, that's what I can look. Founding. Oh, you already saw that. Um, where's their name? Where's their name? Because this was a very powerful family coming out of Rome. Colonimus, the Colonimus family. If you look into the Colonimus family is looked at as one of the founding families of Ashkenazis, which moved into the Rhineland, coming out of the Roman Empire. It's kind of an interesting tie because the Colonimus family is one of the very top families which were really close with the Flavian dynasty. If you look up and even when you hear about like Josephus in the Bible, he goes by Flavius Josephus. Well, Berenice um, would be tied in with that Jewish family, the Colonimus family, to a degree. If you look up Berenice, Berenice says that she is the granddaughter of goodness, I'm blanking on everything right now. Of Herod. She's the granddaughter of Herod. If you look up who Herod is and look up Herod's genealogy, then that's a big, huge red flag on who Berenice is. And if Berenice is tied to the Colonimus family, then that tells you exactly. I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to get us in too much trouble. But yeah, I guess I am being called. So I am going to have to leave it there. I can't answer that question. So that's where the counterfeit Christ from. The counterfeit Christ comes. Well, there were multiple. You got to remember, in that time there were multiple counterfeit Christs, and also there were the name. Well, the name that is transliterated to Jesus, the transliteration, is was a common name. Some people would say Yeshua. I won't go into what in the Paleo Hebrew what I believe the actual name was. But anyway, uh, let's just say that that was a very common name. There were plenty of people throughout that time period who wrote about who had that name. And then there were plenty of people who were known as like tricksters, deceivers. So when you look at a movie like The Book of Clarence, though it's a fictional movie, it is a very good movie explaining what was going on that it talks about, because it even talks about what's his name, Simon. It even talks about Simon, who was said to do miracles and all these things like that, and was a false messiah. And I don't know, I'm not going to lead y'all down too many roads, but it's just, even if you're not a person of faith, it's still very interesting. So, I mean, just putting it out there. I always thought Europeans were changed by ice age, natural adaptation. I would disagree with that, Thomas. I would disagree. Um, and I've even heard a scientist make that argument, and then once it starts, um, it was Simon Bar something, but you're close. Bar Simon. Uh, man, I don't know. I must not be getting enough. Simon the Sorcerer. That's who it was. Simon the Sorcerer. Hold on one second. One- Sorry about that. I had a phone call I had to take. But yeah, look up. This one was cooked up by the Flavians through Josephus, which Josephus was tight with the Flavian dynasty. That's why he called himself Flavius Josephus. Bar Jesus, yes, that's who you were conflating. Simon the sorcerer with Bar Jesus. But yeah, that's who it is. Correct. But yeah, you look into that's I mean you look into Rome, and you start digging into Rome, and you start digging into Roman history and all the different stuff that was going on with Roman history, and it will start to give you a lot of clues on what the hell has been going on, what went on through the Renaissance period, and what led into the conquest into South America, all the way to the conquest of them coming into the Americas, and all of that stuff is all tied in. Favorite Flav have any relation? You guys are funny. But on that note, I am going to end it here. And much appreciation to everybody who took the time to listen, and everybody who will listen to this later on. This has been the Political Matrix. I am your host, Marcus and Morpheus Cage, saying blessings to all y'all out there, and good luck. Hopefully, you guys are all safe. And stay safe throughout this weekend. And if you guys are watching some football, good luck to your teams, except for Yonina going against me. How dare you? But that said, y'all enjoy that. I got a game tomorrow, looking excited. And that's right, I'll see y'all tomorrow anyway. So, well, I don't know. Depends on who's all here. Y'all might be busy or not. I don't know. But as soon as I hear from, oh, that's right. They also called him Simon the Magician too. But um, the moment I talk to Chris, I'll see what time we're gonna go live, and then I will try to put it up as soon as possible. This has been the Political Matrix. Y'all have a good one. Thank you.